Om Jnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chaksurun Militam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namah Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Sayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadandikam Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namini Namaste Sarasvati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatire Satarine Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Iti Namine Sivarsavani Devi Daita Kripabdaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Daine Prabhave Namaha Madhurujjala Premadya Sri Rupanuga Bhaktida Sri Gaura Karuna Shakti Grahaya Namostute Namaste Gaura Bani Sri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupanuga Virudapa Apasiddhanta Dvanta Harine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vaivata Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. So today is the fourth day of the dark half of the month of Pos or Narayan. On this day, 1937, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur entered the eternal pastimes of Sri Sri Radha and Krishna. And we're sitting here in the beautiful Sri Sri Radha Ras Bihariji Mandir, built by his foremost disciple, Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada, in front of the beautiful deities of Sri Sri Gaurnitai, Sri Sri Radha Ras Bihari Lalita Vishaka, Sri Sri Sitaram Lakshman Hanumanji, and sitting at the lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada. And that Ras Bihari temple is situated in what Prabhupada called his office. And to me, I always feel very deeply Prabhupada's presence here, because we had no idea what Prabhupada was doing when he got this land, so much trouble, so much fight. He established the deities. Even before there was a temple, he established the deities to secure the land. We were ready to give it up. We couldn't understand what he was talking about. Big marble temple, twin tower guest house. In those days, to us, temple meant we rented a house in the low rent district of the city. We painted it funny colors and we put a sign outside Hare Krishna temple. So what Prabhupada was talking about, might marble temple, twin tower guest house, we had no idea. So this is Prabhupada's temple. I feel Prabhupada so much here. So we're here to honor the disappearance day of His Divine Spiritual Master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Prabhupada. As we all know, the father of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was our great-great-grandfather Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who was a pioneer in preaching Krishna consciousness in languages outside of the Indian language. He's the first acharya to attempt to spread the message of Lord Chaitanya beyond the shores of India. In fact, his book Lord Chaitanya's life and precepts in English, arrived on the shores of Canada in the birth year of Srila Prabhupada, our Srila Prabhupada. At that time, he was the magistrate of Puri, and he had a rented house just hardly a quarter of a mile from the entrance to Jagannath Temple. And he was, despite all of his duties, he was pushing on the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya with all his might. But they felt so much opposition, there was so much opposition in this world to the pure message of Sriman Mahaprabhu. He was praying to Lord Jagannath, please send me someone who can assist me. He was constantly praying that I need some assistance. The people of this world are so stricken by desires for material enjoyment, for Mayavad philosophy, for deviant Gaudiya philosophy. How will I be able to push the real mission of Mahaprabhu on? So it just so happened that although the Rath Yatra usually takes place in several hours, that particular time the cart stopped in front of Bhaktivinoda's house. For 3 days it remained there. Taking advantage of the situation, he advised his wife, because a child had just been born very recently. He told her to take that child onto the cart. So, our Prabhupada explains, she was the wife of the district magistrate, no one could stop her. So she immediately climbed on the cart, placed the Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, his name was Bimal Prasad. Placed him at the feet of Lord Jagannath, immediately reached for Lord Jagannath's lotus feet, and Lord Jagannath reciprocated by dropping his garland, which enwrapped the child. Seeing all these things, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur could understand, this is the empowered personality that I was praying for. In fact, at his birth, we got a little ahead of ourselves. At his birth, his umbilical cord was wrapped around his chest just like a Brahminical cord, Brahman threads, and left a permanent mark on his body. So Bhaktivinoda knew that he had to take special care of this child. And as a child, he was amazing. He would learn things very quickly, even at a very young age. There's an incident when he was 4 years old. Bhaktivinoda had brought some mangoes home. And he's only a 4-year little boy. They're completely controlled by their senses. As soon as they see something to eat, immediately goes in the mouth. Before that, everything goes in the mouth, but when we're little tiny babies, then everything goes in the mouth. But for a small child, in food, he saw a mango, immediately took the mango, began to eat. Bhaktivinoda entered the room, he said, "Oh, you are a big offender. I brought that mango for the service of the Lord. Before being offered to the Lord, you should never take." Even at 4 years old, he took a vow, I am a great offender, I will never take mango for the rest of my life. And even in his old age, as Acharya of the Gaudiya Math, the disciples would press him to take mango, he still refused. Such determination. When we hear the glories of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur, we feel very shallow in our devotion. Our devotion is not deep at all. Just imagine, 4 years old. In his school, he excelled. He had a photographic memory. He could remember anything after hearing it even once. And he wasn't interested in playing sports and frivolous activities. He was only interested in hearing about the glories of Sriman Mahaprabhu and Vaishnava philosophy, because Bhaktivinoda was encouraging him in this way. Even by 7 years old, he had memorized the entire Bhagavad Gita. Even at 68, I haven't memorized whole Bhagavad Gita. But 7 years old, he memorized whole Bhagavad Gita and could quote the verses and give the explanations. At that time, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur gave him Harinam and initiated him into Nishringa mantra. No one is really sure, but everybody is pretty much convinced it was that one Ugram Biram Mahavishnum Jvalantam Sarvato Mukham Nishringam Bhishanam Badram Mrityum Mrityum Namamyam. Later he was attracted to a Kurma Shalagram Shila. So even though one should be very qualified to worship such a thing, as Bhakti Vinod gave his 7-year-old son this Kurma Shalagram Shila, initiated him into the worship. Anyway, in his school days, he excelled in every subject and everyone was constantly praising him. And as he went on to college, he became interested in astrology. Because that time in India, people were becoming influenced by Western thought and they thought that our Eastern astrology is inferior to Western astrology. But in fact, the two main books of astrology, Surya Siddhanta and Siddhanta Shiromani, he had them translated properly and printed. And the texts themselves describe how corrections have to be made periodically, because the planets don't always move exactly in a regular manner. It's like we say the month is 30 days, but it's not actually 30 days. It's a little bit less. We say the year is 365 in our Western calendar, but even then we have to add in a leap year because things don't always move exactly. So for 800 centuries, being so much bound by tradition, they refused to correct the calculations of Surya Siddhanta and Siddhanta Shiromani. So people's Jyotish had become a farce. So against the current of everyone, he corrected them and established real Jyotish philosophy and real Jyotish Siddhanta. In fact, it's described after leaving his education, he was teaching astrology, and there was one great astrologer who was one of those ones who was leaning toward Western astrology. So he invited one of his name was Bapudev. So he had one of his disciples, one of his students, tried to debate with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati on astrology. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's defeat of his student was so powerful that Bapudev, in sheer fright, in sheer humiliation, passed stool and urine in his pants. And though everyone pressed him to continue with his studies of astrology, he was more interested in Gaudiya philosophy. And he was assisting his father. But he felt something inadequate about just being the assistant. He wanted to establish his independence. So there was somehow the king of Tripura and Agartala, he was very much follower of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So he offered Srila Bhaktisiddhanta some service in his kingdom, in his secretariat. So he was taking his salary and doing some work for the king. That king died. The next one again also engaged him and tried to have him sort out because so much corruption and graft was there in the government. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta gradually became so disgusted. Everyone's so much materially motivated. They're cheating the king in so many ways. He finally left that service and again took up assisting his father in various ways. At that time, Bhaktivinoda had established Bhakti Bhavan in Calcutta. Then later he went to Vrindavan and stayed with one, what was his name? I think Madhusudan Goswami of Radharaman Mandir, and took advantage of studying their devotion and studying many books they had in the library there. Then he set out all over India. He traveled to all the different places collecting books and having discussions with the different acharyas of the different Vaishnava philosophies, even with Mayavadis. But although he went to Sringeri Math, one of the chief places of Shankaracharya, they refused to talk to him because he wasn't born in a Brahmin family. But most likely it was because they were afraid of him, because he would smash Mayavad philosophy wherever he went. Because not only was he against charlatanism even in ordinary work, but especially in spiritual life, he couldn't tolerate fakeness and cheating. Eventually he decided, after collecting so many books and having so much discussions, he decided to go to Mayapur. And he decided to chant 1 billion names of the Lord. So he made just a tiny little ramshackle hut near the Yoga Pit. And there he began doing his Nam Bhajan. But even while doing his Nam Bhajan, he still interrupted to go here and there for different purposes. Just like at that time, because Bhaktivinoda and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta were propagating that even without being born in a Brahmin family, one can become a guru, one can become a Vaishnava, one can become a Brahmin. There was much opposition, and the Smartas rose up and they called a big meeting which they denounced the Vaishnavas like anything. So Bhaktivinoda, the Vaishnavas also called a meeting, and they wanted Bhaktivinoda to attend, but at that time Bhaktivinoda was indisposed. And he was crying, is there no one who can save the Vaishnava Dharma? So he called Bhaktisiddhanta from Mayapur. Actually, I got a little ahead. Anyway, we'll finish this story. To come and attend this meeting. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati attended the meeting, and recognizing his superiority, even though there were older Mahants and Acharyas present, they all asked him to address the assembly. And the Smarta Brahmas had also sent although they weren't invited, they sent their representatives. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta began to glorify from the Shastra so many verses glorifying the Brahmins. So all the Smarta Brahmas became very happy. But then he began to quote the Shastra, proving that a Vaishnava is a real Brahmin, and without becoming a Vaishnava, no one can be a real Brahmin or a guru. Then they began shouting, and the police already had come there, so they had to quiet them. And he went on preaching very heavily, proving very dramatically and very emphatically and authorizedly from the Shastra that everyone in the assembly rose up and began to cheer. And the Smarta Brahmins had to slink out of the assembly, being completely defeated. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was very careful that no one should touch his feet. So that time the crowd was pressing forward, and the police, they didn't know what to do. So they took Bhaktisiddhanta aside, they brought a bucket of water, placed his feet in the water against his will. Then they added a few more buckets of water to a big pot, and then they distribute that water to the whole crowd just to pacify the situation. So actually we've forgotten, we got a little ahead. Before he did his Nam Bhajan, although he'd received Harinam from his father, he had not received Diksha. And his father encouraged him to take Diksha from Srila Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj, who had returned from doing his bhajan in Vrindavan and now was staying in Navadvip. And he used to come, he was very fond of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and used to praise him that you were really pushing on the message of my Mahaprabhu. And we know Srila Gaurkishore Das Babaji was completely illiterate. He couldn't even write his name. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur was renowned scholar all over the world. So he was a little taken aback by the proposal of his father, but upon observing Gaurkishore Das Babaji's strict renunciation and his unflinching faith in the Lord, he was completely attracted. He said, first time I laid my eyes on my Prabhu, he called him my Prabhu, I could understand that such a person has never descended to this material plane. And at that time, many great spiritual leaders wanted to get Srila Bhaktisiddhanta as their disciple, but he was refusing them all, knowing them all to be charlatans of one sort or another. But to have such an illustrious disciple was a great pride, but he was rejecting all of their advances. So he approached Srila Gaurkishore Das Babaji and asked to become his disciple, and Gaurkishore Das Babaji refused. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, this was a jolt, because I was used to being praised. Then I realized that all my learning and everything was useless, that I am a completely fallen, conditioned soul enwrapped in material nature. My guru jolted me out of my illusion. So I was determined to become his disciple, that this is the person. So over and over he approached, he said, when Mahaprabhu gives the order, every time he'd asked, did Mahaprabhu give the order? He said, I forgot to ask. And it went on like this. Finally he understood that he was totally worthless, and without achieving the mercy of Gaurkishore Das Babaji, then his life was totally useless. So quoting that verse, Karuna na hoile kandiya kandiya prana na rakibo ara. That if you don't accept me, then crying and crying I will give up my life. So this turned Srila Gaurkishore Das Babaji's heart. So he told him, you go take bath in the Jalangi and come here. And he gave him a few little knotted threads for Japamala. He had one little tiger skin cap. There was something else I can't remember just now that Bhagwan Das Babaji had given him. So very simple things, but Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur received them as very most valuable things being received from the hand of a Paramahamsa. Thus he was initiated by Srila Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj. Although opposing members always try to say that no such initiation actually took place. But I met one Babaji one time who was living in Gopinath Bazaar in Vrindavan, and he told me that his guru was present when Srila Gaurkishore Das Babaji, he saw the initiation of ceremony of when Gaurkishore accepted Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Babaji is no more, I don't remember his name. Many other things he did while he was doing his Nam Bhajan. His initiation by Srila Bhakti was in January of 1900, 117 years ago. January of 1900, he received initiation from Gaurkishore Das Babaji. So after his Nam Bhajan, first thing he wanted to do was establish a printing press. But at that time, Mayapur was just jungle. And to bring such modern, at that time, modern technology. we don't even see those big printing presses anymore. So it was impractical. So he leased some property in Calcutta and established his press there for 1 year, then later brought it to Mayapur. And Bhaktivinoda was always encouraging him, don't get lost in your private bhajan, we have to save the world. And he asked him especially to take care of the Yoga Pit temple, because it was at that time it was jungle. Even paying people to do the puja, still they wouldn't remain. It was such a remote place. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had the headache of trying to maintain, because Bhaktivinoda was becoming old. Then there's about that time, there's another incident. Srila Gorkashore Das Babaji Maharaj left this world. So everybody wanted to take his body and make a samadhi, because everyone knew that Gorkashore Das Babaji was a great Vaishnava. They would come and pay their respects to his samadhi. They would leave money so they could make a lot of money. They were interested in making money. At that time, Gorkashore Das Babaji was living in a latrine. Just see how renounced. He was living in a latrine. So, without WhatsApp and Facebook, somehow Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati got word that his Guru Maharaj had left. He crossed the river and met some of the devotees who were coming and saying, there's a big assembly, there's a big argument going on, who's going to give him samadhi? So immediately rushed to the spot. The police also came there. They suspected there would be trouble. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta declared that I am the only disciple of Babaji Maharaj, so it is my duty to give him samadhi. The Babaji said, you're not a renunciate, you're not a Babaji, you can't give a Babaji samadhi. And he said, I may not be Babaji like you, but at least I'm following all the principles, because my Guru Maharaj's body is totally spiritual. Anybody who's breaking the principles, he will not be able to touch his body. He will be destroyed if he touches his divine body. So my challenge is, anybody who in the last year, in the last 6 months, in the last month, in the last fortnight, in the last week, in the last night, anybody who has never had no illicit connection with a woman, he can touch my spiritual master's body. And the police chief was surprised. He said, how will we prove? He said, I will take their word. And all of them turned their backs and left the assembly. So some wealthy brothers gave him some land on the bank of the Ganga. With his own hands, he excavated the Samadhi Mandir for Srila Gorkashore Das Babaji and placed him in Samadhi. Later, those two guys, although they donated the land, they tried to say that it was their own, but because of their offense, they were totally destroyed. They lost their property. Even the Ganga took that property away, and Bhaktisiddhanta took that Samadhi to his mutt in Mayapur. So later, after his Nam Bhajan, because when he was in South India on his tour collecting books and discussing philosophy, he specifically discussed with Ramanuja Sampradaya about Vaishnava Sannyas, because he saw that people were making a farce out of Babaji ashram, I can't say ashram, Babaji Vesh. So rather than become a Babaji, he wanted to become a sannyas. But not seeing anybody fit, then he simply took a picture of his own spiritual master, Srila Gorkashore Das Babaji Maharaj, and accepted sannyas from him. And he had gotten that, I forgot, that when he was teaching astrology, all the pundits were so amazed, they gave him the title Siddhanta Sarasvati. So that's where he got that title. So he became Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj. And he began lecturing in Mayapur and sometimes going to Calcutta to lecture. But everybody encouraged him. In Mayapur, a few people would come, and some young people had, hearing his lectures, had become disciples. He would also go to Calcutta, and many learned people would come, and they all encouraged him that if you lecture in Mayapur, who will come? If you lecture here, then so many people will be influenced, and you can push back the false preachers of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. So he accepted their proposal. So the first mutt he established, at that time it wasn't called Gaudiya Mutt, it was called Bhaktivinoda Asan. That was in Ultadanga Road. Of course, we know at Ultadanga Road, that was the first place that our Prabhupada met Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. He didn't want to go. He was also our Prabhupada was also disappointed with all the so-called sadhus. He had seen his father was always receiving these sadhus, but he knew they were all smoking and doing so many things. So when his friends approached him, that in Ultadanga there's a nice sadhu preaching Krishna Consciousness, he didn't want to go. But somehow they forced him to go. And he came there, and as he bowed down, even without even being introduced, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta could understand, you're an intelligent, educated boy, young man, you should preach the cult of Mahaprabhu in the English language. And Prabhupada was shocked. He said, he hasn't even been introduced. He doesn't even know who he is. Already he's telling him like this. And then he told him, but who will hear the message of Mahaprabhu? We're ruled over people. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said the message of Mahaprabhu doesn't require a political change. It is the most urgent thing for the suffering humanity. It doesn't require this government or that government, doesn't matter. The message of Mahaprabhu is supreme over all things, and it is urgent because everybody in this world is dying. And as they hear the message of Mahaprabhu, they will continue to rot in this material world. And he was, although amongst his friends he had never been defeated, he immediately was happily defeated. And he understood when his friends asked him, what do you think about this sadhu? He said, oh, Mahaprabhu's message is in very good hands. He was very impressed. And he said, Prabhupada explained, from that moment I accepted him as my spiritual master. There was no formal ceremony, but that moment I accepted him. So then he began his preaching in earnest from Ultadanga Road. He also began, Bhaktivinoda had asked him to perform Navadvip Mandal Prikrama because this will benefit the whole world. So he started his Navadvip Mandal Prikrama. He would also go to Vrindavan, perform Braj Mandal Prikrama. Then he acquired some land in Mayapur, and that deity of Mahaprabhu that he had been, when he was doing his Nam Bhajan, he established the deities of Gandharvika Giridhari and Mahaprabhu, that same Mahaprabhu in front of whom he had done his Nam Bhajan. And he started a big mission in Mayapur also, apart from Yogapeeth. Then he began traveling all over India, establishing, in his lifetime he established 64 Gaudiya Mats, even out that time Gaudiya Vaishnavism was practically restricted to Orissa, Bengal, and a little bit Vrindavan. But actually even now, because everybody, they were just doing their Nirjan Bhajan in Vrindavan, even now, to this day, the Brishvasis, they accept Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was a great saint. Despite it was Mahaprabhu who saved Vrindavan, who saved Braj. Braj was becoming lost, and Mahaprabhu came there. Nobody even knew where Radhakund and Shamakund were. Mahaprabhu discovered them. He sent the Goswamis, 6 Goswamis to discover all the... Practically, everybody in Braj should have become Muslim, but it's only because of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati that there still Vaishnava culture is there. But still they don't know. The Babajis were just imagining themselves to be gopis and not doing any practical preaching work. So even today they still think, oh, Mahaprabhu is a great saint. Nobody accepts him as Supreme Personality. Very few. So he began his unflinching... Prabhupada met him many times in Vrindavan also. As later in Radhakund he established the Kunja Bihari Gaudiya Math, and nearby we know Bhaktivinoda's house in Godrumdweep is called Swananda Sukhada Kunj. So in Radhakund Bhaktisiddhanta established Braja Swananda Sukhada Kunj. And despite opposition from all the Babajis, he managed to establish a Pushpa Samadhi of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur there. We're getting a little ahead. Because while he was, after Ulta Danga, was very soon, around that time, that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur left this world. And he established his Samadhi in Godrumdweep at Swananda Sukhada Kunj. And shortly after that, then also Gorkashore Das Babaji also left. When those 2 Prabhus left, he almost gave up his preaching work. He said, who is there? If I print anything, who will I show it to? My Prabhus are gone. And he retreated into his Nirjan Bhajan again. But he was hearing constantly within his heart the words of his father that do not... give up preaching the message of Mahaprabhu. One night he saw a dream. He saw all the Pancha Tattva, he saw the Goswamis, he saw Bhaktivinoda, he saw Gorkashore, and they all said, don't worry, because he was feeling there's so much, I get so much headache, I get so much opposition whenever I try to preach the pure message of Mahaprabhu. Everyone is fighting against me. And now my 2 Prabhus are gone. Who will help me? In the dream, they told him, you just preach the pure message of Hari Bhajan and preach the message of Mahaprabhu. Don't worry about anything. Everything will be taken care of. So then he again took up his mission in earnest. In fact, as I said, he established 64 Gaudiya Maths. Even he made attempt to preach in foreign countries. He sent Bhan Maharaj also. I just learned that he sent Saranga Prabhu also. Though he couldn't actually establish much, but he was attempting. And still, in his last days, the last instruction that Prabhupada got was, you preach the message of Mahaprabhu. In English language, you will be benefited and those who hear you will be benefited. This was the last instruction our Prabhupada received from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada. So he was always pushing this point to spread. We're only sitting here today because of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur. That is why it's so important that we observe this day, because it is only by his, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's desire, Bhaktivinoda's desire, that we're sitting in this beautiful temple here today. Speaking about the opposition, Bhaktivinoda at one point Srila Bhaktisiddhanta at one point, he wanted to do some bhajan in Puri. This is before he started his preaching movement. So right up the street from, and especially he wanted to be near Namacharya Haridas Thakur. So right up the street on Saptasan Road, the first asan is Giridhari Math, where Jagadananda Pandit had done his bhajan and his Radha Giridhari, his worship there. So Bhaktivinoda managed to get his son some service in that Giridhara. It's still there, right around the corner. Very nice pandas are there. The younger brother I know, Krishna Chandra, I can't remember the older brother. They're very, very favorable to the Western devotees. And then later, Bhaktivinoda purchased land just kitty corner from Haridas Thakur's samadhi, he named it Bhakti Kutir. And there he began to have discourses. And one Radharaman Charan Das Babaji, who was a great Babaji at that time in Orissa, used to come to hear the discourses of Bhaktivinoda and Bhaktisiddhanta. And they were great friends. But at some point, Radharaman Charan and his followers invented some artificial mantra, Bhajai Nitai Gaur Radhe Shyam Japo Hare Krishna Hare Ram. And they refused to chant Hare Krishna mantra in Kirtan. So Bhaktisiddhanta and Bhaktivinoda, they tried to impress on him, you shouldn't invent something new like this, you shouldn't, but still he couldn't listen. And the arguments became very heated. And Radharaman Charan Das Babaji was very popular, so people became very upset because Bhaktisiddhanta would vituperously preach against his concoctions. And it got to the point that in public, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was preaching very heavily against his movement, so that finally they were threatening to kill Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. So Bhaktivinoda told him, you better leave, go back to Calcutta. So all his life, so much opposition was there to the pure preaching of Mahaprabhu's message. But still he persevered. And he always said that the printing press was the Brihat Madanga. Other Madanga you can hear for a couple of blocks, but this printing press Madanga, that can be heard throughout the world. So he always pressed on this and improved he began printing even a newspaper, Nadia Prakash. And everybody asked, how can you print a newspaper about spiritual subject matter? And at that time it was just weekly. He said every week. He said, in this material world, all over the world, there's millions of cities that have dozens of printing presses printing out news of this limited material existence. Every day, millions of newspapers are going out just about this material world. About the spiritual world, we can print a newspaper every second. So weak is a nothing. And he printed so many wonderful books. The intelligentsia of Calcutta began to be turned to the real message of Mahaprabhu. In this way, he was pushing on against all opposition, and he gained a lot of respect from the intelligentsia of Calcutta. Even from 1935, he began to hint. In many of his lectures, he said, my time is short. Actually, we're getting ahead. His crown glory was finally, from Ultadanga, they finally acquired beautiful property in the middle of Calcutta, in Bagh Bazaar. And he built a wonderful marble temple there. And they transported the deities they had a big procession transporting the deities from the old Ultadanga temple to Bagh Bazaar. Although later Bhaktisiddhanta became rather disgusted because people were fighting over which room they were going to stay in and who was going to be proprietor and this and that. Later I can't remember, it might be I don't remember the date, but he was staying in Radhakund, and our Prabhupada was doing his medical business not far in Agra. He was selling. So he took a train to Mathura and came to Radhakund to meet Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati, and walking on the Sangam at Radhakund. The Sangam at Radhakund is the most holy place for all us ISKCON devotees, because there he told, Agun Jalbe, there will be fire. He said, better we take the marble from the mutt, sell it, and print books. Then he looked Abai Babu in the eyes and he said, if you ever get money, do what? Print books. So book distribution was born from the Sangam at Radhakund. That's the most sacred place for all us ISKCON devotees. But later in his lectures, he began to hint that I have not much more time in this world. You all concertedly preach the message of Mahaprabhu. He gradually became weaker and weaker. And in 36, despite his ailing health, he made a tour of Puri and South India and many, many places, coming to Vrindavan. Then he returned to Puri. And as his health was failing, he came back to Bagh Bazar. And in December, he began telling his disciples, you just follow the path of our Prabhu's Rupa Raghunath, work together. Our only life is Hari Bhajan. Without Hari Bhajan, there's no life. Don't waste your time. Work cooperatively together to push on this movement. The Bhaktivinoda Dhara, the current, the flow of mercy from Bhaktivinoda will not be destroyed. It will go on and on. You all work together. And finally, in the very end of December of 1936, he got a heavy fever. And people began to stream around from all over because they suspected now he was going to leave. Even despite his fever, Ananta Vasudeva Prabhu was also suffering. Ananta Vasudeva woke up one morning to see Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, despite his own fever, had come to see him. He was so loving of his disciples. Then on the morning, January 1st, 1937, around 5:30 in the morning, Pranavananda Prabhu was ending his turn of vigil of fanning Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, and Krishnananda Brahmachari came. And when they changed services, the noise woke up Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. Who's there? It's me, Pranavananda. Pranavananda? He said, are you okay, Prabhupada? And he said, oh, Krishna, Krishna, and left this world to enter into the eternal pastimes of Radha and Krishna and Golokadam. So that was the fourth day of the dark half of the month of Narayan or Posh. That's this very Tithi today. We're gathered here to celebrate this holy disappearance day of the Lion Guru. There's so many stories we could tell, but our duty is to go out and again, following in the footsteps of Rupa Raghunath, following Prabhupada's order to distribute books. So here we'll give our voice a rest. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur ki jai. Any questions or comments? In the back, my god sister Rukmini. Oh, yeah. Somebody else. Sorry.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. When Bhaktisiddhanta came to know that some people wanted to kill him, what action he took against of them?
When he came to know
that some people wanted to kill him.
I've heard the story from Narayan Maharaj, because his Guru Maharaj Bhakti began Keshav Maharaj was there. And Keshav Maharaj was also lean and thin, and somewhat looked like Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. This was in Mayapur. The caste Goswamis were fighting like anything about his preaching. So, that time Bhakti-Pragan Keshav was in white cloth. But he told Prabhupada that you give me your saffron cloth and you take my white cloth. And this way Bhakti-Pragan Keshav Maharaj went one way and Bhaktisiddhanta in white cloth, being recognized, managed to escape. So give the mic to Rukmini. Also, one of the things that very impressive, he said, Bhaktisiddhanta in his last darshan, he said, do not be disappointed that the people of this world will not take to Krishna Bhakti. Do not ever become dejected, and do not become disappointed. Just push on with your preaching. Those who are sincere will hear you.
Prabhu, can you tell the story of when he came to Vrindavan to do the Braj Mandala Parikram and all the controversy that happened with the temples there?
Well, except for somehow Radharaman Mandir, they were quite open-minded. They accepted him because he stayed with Madhusudan Goswami of Radharaman Temple and studied there. So he had his old relation. But the other temples, because of his accepting Brahmins from non-Brahmin birth, they closed all their doors of their temple, refused to let his Prikrama party take darshan. Because nowadays they're very happy. They want to see the white person, come, give donation, give donation. One story I remember, I was doing so much history, I forgot always struck me, was Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur was in Midnapur, near the Orissa border with Bengal. And he gave a lecture that morning, very heavy, that we shouldn't have even a pinch of material desire. Don't be attached to anything in this world. Don't have a pinch of material. One of those heavy lectures where you just go, hopeless. And after his lecture, then he was sitting and he was writing at his table. It was like they didn't have a full temple there, it was just open. So everybody could see he was writing there on his table, and writing, they didn't have iPods, or laptops, didn't even have ballpoint pens, they had ink pen, where probably some of you young, you don't even remember those things, where you dipped it in the ink and then you wrote. So he was writing like that, he had a little ink pot, and he was writing. And the cook came to the go-down, it was a little bamboo go-down. He opened the door, took something out, and because his hands were full, he didn't bother to lock the door again. So while Bhaktisiddhanta was writing, a monkey came and ran into the go-down, grabbed some bananas, and ran out. And Bhaktisiddhanta jumped up, kicked over the table, the ink went all over whatever he was writing. He took a stick and chased that monkey and got the bananas back. So the cook, and all the other devotees that came, they tried to set the table back. He knocked over his writing table and everything. He's sitting on the ground with a small table. And he put everything back. And then the cook came sheepishly and he said, Maharaj, I don't understand. You told us this morning that we shouldn't be attached to anything material, but just for some monkey stealing some bananas, you knocked over all your work and everything. And Bhakti said, you rascal, you think those are your bananas. Those are Radharani's bananas. It's your duty to protect them for Radharani, not your bananas. So I always felt that was very instructive to us. We shouldn't waste anything. We should see that everything is Radharani's property, and we've been appointed to take care of that property on behalf of Radharani. All right, one more question because I don't want to delay the book distribution.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Prabhu, that the Brahman Diksha is given on the basis of qualities. The Brahman Diksha,
yes,
Prabhupada allowed to be given on the basis of qualities, and certainly it He didn't mean it to be a mechanical process that somebody takes a Harinam Diksha and immediately takes a Brahmin Diksha at a certain point of time. The person has to cultivate the qualities.
Yes.
And then he has to take. Let's say if somebody already has the qualities and he takes Brahmin Diksha and somebody challenges that you're not a birth Brahmin. So, like our philosophy is Trinadapi Sunichena. So if somebody says you're not a birth Brahmin, so is it not good to accept, okay, I'm not Shudra, doesn't matter, I'm not a Brahmin. I mean, why do we need to fight on that point? Because somewhere down the line, Trinadapi Sunichena.
Because they were challenging the teachings of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Not just Bhaktisiddhanta, in that meeting of Brahmana Vaishnava, the main organizer was from Shamananda Sampradaya, because Shamananda also wasn't born in a Brahmin family. So it was disturbing the preaching, it was creating doubts in the minds of the people. It was for preaching. We're not interested in any pratishta for ourselves, but for the people should not have doubts. Therefore, shastrically, they defeated this point and showed that just like Nana Shastra Vicharani Kanud, Saddharma, we can quote if just like we know a few verses, like we can quote Bhagavad Gita, Chatravarnamayasa Guna Karma Vibhagasa, by Guna and Karma, he doesn't say Janma Karma. We can quote a few verses, but I tell you, in Kumbh Mela, I've run into Mayavadis, and just like the Ganga flowing, they can quote millions of verses to you that prove that unless you're born in India, unless you're born in a Brahmin family, you can't be a Brahmin. So they want to disturb the devotees in so many ways. So for the disturbance of the preaching work, Bhaktisiddhanta, like the Ganga, he could quote the opposing verses that prove Saddharma. These are all Karma Kanda type verses, but he quoted Saddharma, that Goswami's written Saddharma, the eternal principle. The eternal principle is that if somebody develops the qualities. So we get Brahman Diksha, we call it initiation. Initiation means beginning. Because sometimes we like to point our finger at the caste Brahmins, but you should always know there's three fingers pointing back at you. Because even our Prabhupada said, to make Brahmins out of you is like washing coal. No matter how much you wash coal, it's still dirty. So we should take it is chance for us to become. You got Brahman Diksha, is now chance to develop those qualities. Are you actually we have to take it seriously. Are you actually developing those qualities?
In any case, Prabhu, we should not be egoistically claiming.
Yeah, for ourselves, we're Janada Pisunit, but for the preaching work, the people shouldn't think that our mission is unbona fide. That was Bhaktisiddhanta's purpose. Because that Shamananda, many Gaudiya Vaishnava groups the disciples were getting disturbed, and the preaching work, followers were getting disturbed. The preaching work was being disturbed by these people, putting doubts. So for establishing the sampradaya for ourselves, yes, of course, I admit, Prabhupada said it's like coal, and I'm a piece of coal. I have no doubt. I'm very far from being a Brahmin. But anyway, for the preaching work, we have to be just like the bananas. Bananas is a cheapo fruit, that's the cheapest fruit. Why should we care the monkey stole some bananas? But it's not our bananas, it's Radharani's. So it's Radharani's, it's Mahaprabhu's mission, so we have to protect it.
Thank you, Prabhu.
So anyway, we'll end our class here and go distribute this wonderful knowledge to all the fallen souls. Sprinkle the mercy of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati and all the fallen conditioned souls. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada ki. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki. Oh, Premanande.